This adventurous story begins by showing a vast, deserted area stretching as far as the eye can see. Anyone entering this desert would find nothing visible for miles. Deep within this barren land lies a massive mining site, still under operation. Numerous workers are brought in to complete the mining project, which involves constructing a tunnel designed to connect future routes and shorten distances, allowing humans to travel underground instead of above the surface. While the concept is impressive, it's equally risky. Every day, many laborers arrive at the site to work and earn enough money to support their families. The mine extends thousands of feet deep, with multiple chambers created at different levels. Each chamber houses a team of workers racing to finish their tasks before the deadline. Amid this, an engineer begins to sense something is wrong. His team informs him that pieces of mirror are falling from above, which alarms everyone. The engineer becomes concerned, and many workers refuse to continue working. Before constructing such massive mines, mirrors were often embedded into the structure as a safety measure. If the rocks began to grind and shift, the mirrors would fall first, signaling potential collapse. This warning system helped workers evacuate before disaster struck. Fearing the worst, the engineer temporarily halts work and rushes to inform the mine's owner. However, the owner, a selfish man concerned only with profit, dismisses the warning as mere coincidence and insists that the work must continue if they want to get paid. Left with no choice, the engineer convinces his team to resume operations despite the risks. The workers reluctantly continue, digging deeper until they reach the lowest level of the mine, thousands of feet below the surface. The next day, a truck arrives carrying newly hired employees with no experience in such dangerous conditions. Unaware of what lies ahead, they are about to face their first and last mission. As the engineer keeps working nervously, he notices more mirror fragments falling around him, a clear sign that the structure is on the verge of collapsing. Still, driven by the need for money, he continues, just like the others. Suddenly, a strong tremor shakes the mine, causing dirt and rocks to fall from above. Panic spreads as workers run for their lives. Within moments, a massive section of the mine begins to cave in. The chief engineer calls out to his crew, trying to guide them out through the machines, but several cranes and drilling rigs are crushed under falling debris. If anyone had been inside, they wouldn't have survived. In minutes, the entire mining area collapses, blocking all escape routes. The workers are now trapped underground with no way out, many of them injured and terrified. With no other option, they decide to move to a lower level of the mine, where other employees are already stationed. Hoping to find a way out, the trapped workers quickly jump into a construction vehicle and head toward another section of the mine. Some of their fellow workers, still running behind, manage to catch up and climb aboard with help from their teammates. Their only goal now is to reach the lower level of the mining area, no matter what it takes. It didn't look like any of them would make it out alive, but every worker was driven by the desperate hope of reuniting with their families. As rocks continued to fall around them, their truck moved forward, only to encounter another truck coming from the opposite direction. This second truck belonged to the workers stationed on the lowest level, who were also terrified as the tremors and falling debris reached them too. It was now clear that the lower level was no safer than the rest. The entire mining complex was collapsing and claiming lives. The engineer and his remaining team tried to protect each other and find a safer spot, but within moments, a massive boulder crashed down nearby, causing a violent explosion that shook even the surface above. Those in charge on the upper levels noticed the blast and immediately declared an emergency, summoning rescue teams to save the trapped workers. When the engineers' group looked around, they found all the trucks destroyed, many workers severely injured, and several others missing, likely crushed under enormous rocks. They had no medical supplies to treat the wounded, and their only exit was now blocked by a massive boulder. When they tried to touch it, they realized it couldn't be broken or moved by any machine. It was simply impossible. Everyone understood they were completely trapped, with no escape and no guarantee anyone would reach them in time. Despite the hopeless situation, a rescue mission was launched to save those trapped inside. Whether they would survive was uncertain, but the workers were determined to use every bit of their survival knowledge and skills to stay alive. Experts outside began sharing survival techniques that could help them endure until rescue arrived. Soon, the news spread everywhere, and TV channels began covering the disaster. Families of the trapped miners gathered outside the site, hoping and praying for their loved ones. Rescue teams were working tirelessly, but progress was painfully slow, and the chances of survival were slim. The tragedy spread like wildfire across the world, and people everywhere prayed that the miners would be saved. From the outside, there seemed to be no clear passage leading into the collapsed mine. It looked as if the entire structure had sealed itself shut, trapping everyone inside as if by fate. Inside, the trapped workers realized they had to be extremely cautious. With the tunnels sealed, oxygen levels would soon drop, and they weren't sure if they even had enough food supplies to last. Panic began to spread among them until their supervisor, a man named Luis, stepped up. Older and more experienced than most, Luis knew how to handle crises like this. He calmed everyone down and told them that their first priority was to find a possible exit route. Before doing that, he counted every remaining worker to assess their situation. There were only a few left. As the person in charge, it was now Luis's responsibility to keep them alive. He then revealed a crucial detail: there was a special chamber built inside the mine for extreme emergencies like this one. However, the problem was that the chamber could only hold a limited number of people, just 3. That raised a painful question: which 3 among them would be chosen to enter and attempt to survive while the others faced the unknown? Mario then arrives at the spot and says that, as far as he knows, the mining area has several chimneys with ladders that lead upward, so instead of going into the emergency chamber, he will choose 2 people to help him climb the chimneys and try to get out that way. That would leave only a limited number of people, just those who can fit, entering the chamber, while the remaining 3 will try a different escape. Mario quickly picks 2 companions and heads toward the chimney area, while Luis leads the others toward the chamber. It's impossible to know which of the 2 groups will survive. Mario and his 2 men climb toward the chimney, grabbing a ladder and hoping the route will lead them out so they can later help the others, but soon Mario discovers the ladders end halfway up and everything above has collapsed, most likely during the earthquake, so the iron ladders have been ripped out of the rock and fallen away, leaving no way to continue upward. Their chimney plan has failed, so they must think of something else fast. Meanwhile, Luis and his crew reach the secret chamber. Though it's relatively safe and big enough to shelter people, an inspection reveals the food and water reserves are very limited and would be consumed in just a few days. They also lack first aid supplies, medicines are gone, so injured workers risk fatal infections if not treated. Hope is fading. Many still expect the mine owner will try to rescue them and that the official rescue teams will arrive, so they wait anxiously, unaware that reality may be far grimmer. Quakes resume, causing more rockfalls and injuries. Families gather outside and plead with the authorities for every possible effort to save their loved ones, while those trapped can only pray. Fortunately, the tremors subside briefly, giving them a little more time to survive, but oxygen levels are already falling and their condition could worsen in days. Experts advise that in such situations you must stay calm, panic only worsens the danger, and shelter near large boulders so falling debris deflects away. Most importantly, oxygen is decreasing and there may be flammable gases underground, so lighting fires or torches, a common but deadly instinct in dark places, must be avoided because flames consume oxygen. The more fire, the less breathable air remains, so they must avoid any open flames. In a panicked state, the workers knew they had to avoid stirring up dust, as that would only worsen the already poor air quality. They needed to move toward areas where even a faint trace of light was visible and mark every path they took so they could track where they had already been. Food and water had to be used sparingly. According to scientific research, the human body can survive for weeks without food, but only a day or 2 without water. So, by preserving the food and rationing their remaining water carefully, they might survive for weeks underground. Meanwhile, outside the mine, the families of the trapped workers were growing desperate, protesting and demanding that their loved ones be saved. When the mine's owners and officials arrived, the families confronted them angrily, insisting on a rescue at any cost. The owner, however, showed no real concern. He knew the situation was nearly impossible to handle. The mine was completely sealed, making entry dangerous and nearly unachievable. As the protests intensified, police arrived to control the crowd, even resorting to violence against the families. The tragedy had now gained international attention. People around the world were aware that dozens of miners were trapped underground and no one could help them. Seeing the public pressure rise, a government officer went to the president and explained the crisis. He advised that they needed to take immediate action to save the trapped workers. The president, however, initially refused, saying it wasn't his responsibility since the mine was privately owned and the company should handle the rescue. The officer persisted, pointing out that the company lacked the proper equipment and resources for such an operation. He cleverly suggested that if the president intervened and successfully rescued the workers, it would bring him massive international recognition and political advantage. Tempted by the potential fame and political gain, the president finally agreed and gave the officer full authority to act. The next morning, the officer arrived at the mining site, where the families were still waiting, praying for a miracle. Seeing him, they rushed forward, pleading for help. The officer promised them he would do everything possible to save their loved ones. He then met with the mine owner to discuss a rescue plan, but the owner bluntly explained that the mine's entrances were completely blocked by massive rocks that couldn't be broken or moved. Worse, he revealed that the secret chamber inside had only 2 days' worth of food, and now it had already been 3 days since the collapse. The grim reality was that the workers were most likely dead. Hearing all the details, the officer began to understand that the owner might be right. Survival without oxygen for this long was nearly impossible. Even if a rescue mission were launched, it might only recover bodies, not survivors. After completing his investigation, the officer returned to the waiting families and, with a heavy heart, told them the truth, that continuing the rescue mission would be pointless. The workers trapped inside were most likely already gone. Hearing this news left every family member in shock. They were completely heartbroken and hopeless. But just then, the sister of one of the trapped workers, furious and determined, lashed out at the officer, shouting that her brother was still alive. No matter what, she would find him, with or without their help. Her courage reignited the spirit of the other families, who began demanding that the rescue mission continue. Seeing their determination, the officer finally understood and decided to move forward with the rescue operation. Using the government's authority, he called in the best engineers to investigate and locate the trapped workers. One senior engineer worked tirelessly and soon came back with results. He confirmed that several workers were still alive inside one of the chambers. He even estimated how many were trapped and warned that they needed to be rescued immediately, as they wouldn't survive long in those conditions. Multiple rescue strategies were discussed, but deep underground, the trapped workers were already turning against each other. Tension and frustration filled the air as they argued over who was to blame for their situation. Their food supplies were almost gone, and the lack of nourishment had left everyone weak. Luis, the leader among them, tried to calm the group, insisting they ration what little they had left, a bit of milk and scraps, to stretch their survival for as long as possible. Outside, massive rescue operations began. Heavy drilling equipment and powerful machines were brought in, and engineers prepared to dig deep into the mine. Seeing this, the families felt a small spark of hope. The officer even arranged shelter chambers near the site so the families could stay close until their loved ones were rescued. This gave them a sense of relief, knowing that real efforts were being made. However, the rescue faced a major challenge. The drilling area was full of hard, unbreakable rock. The senior engineers weren't sure their machines could penetrate it. The officer, refusing to give up, pushed them to keep drilling. The workers were trapped at the lowest level of the mine, many feet below ground, meaning it would take a long time to reach them. Days passed as the drilling continued. Then, one day, the trapped workers heard a faint, rhythmic sound, the drilling machines. Their hearts lifted with hope. Someone was out there, trying to save them. They began praying and waiting eagerly for the rescue team to break through. The sound grew louder and closer, but then, it suddenly stopped. The lead engineer realized their machines couldn't go any deeper. A massive rock lay directly above the workers, making further drilling impossible. Eventually, the workers realized what had happened. The drilling had stopped completely, and they knew rescue might never come. They had only 1 day's worth of resources left. Even the officer began to lose hope, accepting the engineer's conclusion. Another day passed, what they thought would be their last. But the officer, unwilling to quit, convinced the engineer to try one final time, to drill at a different angle, in a new location. Just maybe, they could find another way in. The engineer agreed and started again. Meanwhile, the workers below were on the brink of death. Their food and water were completely gone, all they could do was wait for the end. Then suddenly, as they lay weak and exhausted, a few drops of water fell from above. When they looked up, they realized, the drilling had reached them. The officer and engineer had found the right spot. Relief and joy swept through the chamber. For the first time in weeks, the trapped workers felt hope. They were finally going to be saved. To send a signal to the surface, the trapped workers began striking the drill from below, creating vibrations that caught the attention of the engineers and the officer above. They realized that the men underground were still alive. To confirm their presence, the workers wrote a letter and tied it to the tip of the drilling machine. When the drill was pulled up and the letter was found, everyone above felt a wave of relief and joy. The workers were alive. When this news reached their families, they broke down in tears of happiness. They were now completely sure that, no matter what, their loved ones would return safely. Even the president arrived at the site to offer his support and encouragement. But the real challenge still remained, to bring them all out alive. Soon, the story spread worldwide, and it was officially confirmed internationally that all the miners were alive. They now needed advanced equipment to carry out the rescue. Major international agencies stepped forward to help, providing supplies and high-tech machinery. The trapped workers even managed to connect via video call, where the president assured them that efforts were being made to widen the small drilling hole, because only by enlarging it could they be rescued. Huge, advanced machines were brought in to make the hole larger. While everyone seemed hopeful, the engineers and the officer were extremely tense. They knew that the massive rock right above the trapped workers was slowly shifting due to the drilling vibrations, and if it collapsed, it would bury everyone alive. They had to rescue the workers before that happened, or all hope would be lost. This critical information was kept secret from the families and the public to avoid panic. The engineers continued their drilling process cautiously, but directly breaking through the rock was dangerous. So, the engineers decided to speak directly to the workers. They explained that the rock they were trying to break was incredibly hard from the top. The only way to weaken it was to create an explosion from below, but this was a huge risk. There was a real chance that the entire rock could collapse. After thinking it through, the workers decided to take that risk. If there was even the slightest chance to escape, they were willing to try. Following the plan, they carefully set up explosives and detonated them. The explosion weakened the rock from below, allowing the drilling machines to finally penetrate through. Seeing this, everyone above was overjoyed. Now that a larger hole had formed, the rescue team began preparing the special capsule that would bring the workers to the surface one by one. A special, very sturdy capsule was brought in, reinforced with iron wires and fitted with wheels that would guide it straight down to reach the trapped workers and bring them up one by one. The capsule was lowered to the underground site, and one young worker volunteered to go first. Overjoyed, he signaled his companions to stay ready at the top. As he was being lifted, the capsule got stuck for a moment. Inside the confined space, he struggled to breathe and shouted in panic. However, with careful control of the pulley system, the capsule was freed and continued its ascent. Within moments, the young worker was safely rescued. Following this method, multiple rounds were conducted, bringing all the workers up one by one. They continued tirelessly for half a day and eventually managed to rescue the last worker trapped inside. Every single worker was saved. The families of the workers thanked the government for saving their loved ones. Naturally, the president's name gained immense recognition worldwide. But the true reality of life, the grueling month the workers spent trapped in such an unimaginable place, was known only to them. Moving forward, these workers would likely start their lives anew with a fresh perspective. And with that, our story comes to an end.